Hello everyone, welcome back to another lesson. Today's lesson is going to be about relative clauses. Well, generally there are two types of relative clauses. Defining relative clause, which gives us essential information, and non-defining relative clause, which gives us non-essential or extra information. In this video, we'll be discussing the first type of relative clause. But before we get into it, let's take a look at the relative clause, what it looks like, what it is used for, okay? So, what's a relative clause? Well, a relative clause, which is also known as adjective clause, is a group of words functioning together with a subject and a verb that describes or modifies a noun or noun phrase in the main clause. And remember, a relative clause is a dependent clause, which means it cannot stand alone. It depends on another part of the sentence. A relative clause often begins with a relative pronoun, such as who, which, or that. For example, who stole the car? That won the contest, which I bought. These are called relative clauses. They don't make sense on their own. So, what's a relative pronoun? Well, a relative pronoun is a word that refers back to a noun in the first part of the sentence. It can be the subject of the relative clause. It can also be the object of the relative clause. Who refers to people, which refers to things or animals, but that refers to both people and things or animals. These words, which, who, and that, are relative pronouns. Now that you've learned what the relative clause and relative pronoun are, let's discuss the first type of relative clause. The first type of relative clause is called a defining relative clause. Well, this type of relative clause gives us essential information about a person or thing in the first part of the sentence that we really need to know. It explains which person or thing that you're referring to. So we need the information in order to understand clearly which person or thing we're talking about. And with a defining relative clause, you don't use commas. There is no punctuation for a defining relative clause. Okay? So let me give you an example. Look at these wonderful kids. It's so nice. Here is my sentence. The boy is my cousin. Okay, so the boy is my cousin. If I said this sentence and you're looking at this picture, if you're curious to find out which boy I mean, of course, your first question is gonna be, well, which boy, right? Because there are two boys in this photo, so we have to clarify which boy I'm talking about. So we need more information. And let's take that sentence away and put in a new one that's more specific, okay? Now this is better. The boy who's got fair hair is my cousin. So, in this case, who's got fair hair is a relative clause. Who, the subject, has got is your verb, and it's describing or modifying the word boy. It's explaining which boy I'm talking about. So I need this information in order to understand which boy we're talking about. Okay? And that's the nature of a defining relative clause. Without this information, I don't have enough to understand the speaker or the writer. Alright? Let me show you another example. So here we go. The man who stole the car was arrested. The man who stole the car was arrested. So again, in this case, who stole the car is a defining relative clause because I needed to understand the subject man, right? Which man? Well, the man who stole the car. The man who stole the car. Okay? I think that's enough for defining relative clause. Let's move on to the next topic. Full and reduced relative clauses. Full and reduced relative clauses, which is the subject matter for grade 12 students. Let's begin with full relative clause. Full relative clause. This is a type of relative clause which has a relative pronoun. And remember, any clause beginning with a relative pronoun is considered as a full relative clause. If the relative pronoun functions as the subject or if it is followed by a verb, we can leave it out. That's what makes it full relative clause. Because we cannot delete or reduce the relative pronoun, that means it's necessary. We need it. For example, the doctor who helped my father was really kind. The doctor who helped my father was really kind. As you can see, we have the verb helped came directly after the relative pronoun. So, in this sentence, the relative pronoun is necessary. We need it, which means it can be deleted, it can be omitted, or it can be reduced, whatever you call. And without it, without the relative pronoun, the sentence doesn't give a complete thought. So keep it in mind that whenever the relative pronoun is followed by a verb, it can be reduced at all. Now, let's move on to the next one. Reduced relative clause. Reduced relative clause. So, what's a reduced relative clause? Well, this is a type of relative clause which lacks a relative pronoun. Lacks means to not have something. So, when it comes to a relative clause, any clause without a relative pronoun is considered as a reduced relative clause. Here is a question. Is it possible to leave out the relative pronoun? The answer is yes, but not always. If the relative pronoun is an object, or if it is followed by a subject, which might be a noun or a pronoun, we can leave it out without affecting the meaning of the sentence. For example, the doctor that we met was really kind. The doctor that we met was really kind. Here the subject coming directly after the relative pronoun that, which means we can leave it out. So, in this case, the relative pronoun is not necessary. It is not needed. So, it can be deleted, it can be omitted, it can be reduced without any change in the meaning. We can simply say, the doctor we met was really kind. The doctor we met was really kind. It still has the same meaning. Here we have some more examples. Let's see which one of the following sentence can be changed into reduced relative clause and which one of them not, and why. The first example is, this is the photo which shows my house, or that shows my house. In this sentence, the relative pronoun is the subject because it is followed by a verb. The verb shows. So, in this case, the relative pronoun cannot be reduced. It's necessary. The second example is, this is the cat which caught the mouse. This is the cat which caught the mouse, or we can say that caught the mouse. Again, for the same reason, we can't reduce the relative pronoun. Why? Because it is followed by a verb. Number 3. These are the new computers which the manager bought last month. In this sentence, the relative pronoun is the object because it is followed by the subject, the manager. The manager, the subject. So here we can reduce the relative pronoun since it's not necessary to complete the meaning of the sentence. Even without the relative pronoun, the sentence still stays the same. Number 4, the receptionist Carla is the person who or that answers phone calls to the company. In this sentence, we can't reduce the relative pronoun because it is followed by a verb. The verb answers. The last example, it is the room which Dr. Deason is using to talk to the students. Here the relative pronoun is the object because it is followed by a subject. So we can reduce the relative pronoun without any change in the meaning. That's all for today. Now let's move on to solve some ministerial questions concerning this topic. Here we go. Okay, before doing the questions, I'd like to remind you of some rules concerning the relative clauses. Rule number 1, this is related to using the relative pronouns. I'm sure you don't need to be reminded of such an easy rule, but by the way, still there are some students who might be struggling with them, okay? Well, rule number 1, who only refers to people, which only refers to things or animals, that refers to all the above, people, things, and animals. Rule number 2, it's about agreement between the relative pronoun and the noun or noun phrase that's preceded, or the noun that the relative pronoun refers to. There should be an agreement between them. For example, in the sentence, the girl which I talked to, there is not an agreement between the word girl and the relative pronoun which. Instead of which, you should use who or that. Rule number 3, it's about when not to reduce the relative pronoun. Well, if the relative pronoun is followed by a verb, including any kind of verb, whether it's verb to be, verb to have, verb to do, action verb, or modal verb, then it cannot be reduced. Rule number 4, this is about when to reduce or leave out the relative pronoun. Well, if the relative pronoun is the object of the relative clause, or if it is followed by a subject, which could be a noun or a pronoun, then the relative pronoun can be reduced because it's not necessary to complete the meaning of the sentence. Okay, now let's do the questions. Question number 1. Choose the one that could be a reduced relative clause. Well, in a question like this, there are 2 things that should be focused on. First of all, make sure if there is an agreement between the relative pronoun and the preceded noun in each option. For example, an agreement between Kurdish and English with the relative pronoun which, a group of people with who, the section with which. Luckily, here they are all getting along, which means there is an agreement between all of them. And secondly, make sure whether the relative pronoun is followed by a verb or a subject. Okay? Here, all the relative pronouns are followed by a verb, which means they cannot be a reduced relative clause. So the correct answer is D, none of these. None of these choices could be a reduced relative clause. Question number 2. Find the reduced relative clause. This question tells us to focus on the choice from which the relative pronoun is reduced. That's an easy one. In this case, just look for the one that lacks or doesn't contain a relative pronoun. Here, all the choices have relative pronouns apart from choice B. So the correct answer is B because it doesn't contain a relative pronoun. It's reduced. Choice B, it is the company the students are most interested in seeing. Here we don't have a relative pronoun because it's reduced. Question number 3. Choose the correct reduced relative clause. In such a question, just focus on the one that lacks or doesn't contain the relative pronoun. Here, option C doesn't have a relative pronoun, so the correct answer is C. Help desk advisors are people customers contact for advice. Question number 4. Which of the following sentence can be changed to a reduced relative clause? Let's see which one can be changed to a reduced relative clause. So, in such a question, just look for the one which is followed by a subject. Here, in all the choices, the relative pronouns are followed by a verb, except for choice C. It is followed by a subject, you, who you helped with her luggage. So it could be changed to a reduced relative clause. That means the correct answer is C. I didn't know the lady who you helped with her luggage. We can also say, I didn't know the lady you helped with her luggage. Even without the relative pronoun, it still has the same meaning. Question number 5. This is the robber who is released by the officer. The relative pronoun who, A, can be deleted, B, is not necessary, C, is necessary, D, is not needed. Here the correct answer is C, is necessary. You know why? Because when a relative pronoun is followed by a verb, then the relative pronoun is necessary. It can't be deleted or reduced. Here we have the verb is released. So we cannot reduce the relative pronoun who. We can't say this is the robber is released by the officer. It'll not make sense. Question number 6. Choose the correct relative clause. In a question like this, it's crucial to make sure if there's an agreement between the relative pronoun and the preceded noun or noun phrase, the noun that is referred back by the relative pronoun. Option A. Newton was the person who discovered gravity. Is there an agreement between the word person and who? Yes. So there is an agreement between the word person and who. Option B. Newton was the person which discovered gravity. Here there is a problem. There is no agreement between the word person and the pronoun which. Since which doesn't refer to people, it only refers to things or animals. So this option is wrong. Option C. Newton was the person that discovered gravity. Here we have that which can refer to people and things. So option C is also correct, which means the correct answer is D. Both A and C are correct. Question number 7. Alan Rees is someone who I regard as a great IT leader. In this sentence, the relative pronoun A is necessary, B is not necessary, C can be deleted, D both, B and C. Do you think the relative pronoun is necessary or not? Because if it is necessary, then it can be deleted. Well, it depends. It depends on what follows the relative pronoun, whether it's a verb or a subject. Here we have a subject, I, after the relative pronoun. So in this case, the relative pronoun is not necessary. We can simply say Alan Rees is someone I regard as a great IT leader. So the correct answer is B, is not necessary. Question number 8. Choose the one that could be changed to a reduced relative clause. In a question like this, in all the choices, you'll see relative pronouns. As you can see, choice A, we have which. In choice B, there is the relative pronoun who, C, who, and option D, we have the relative pronoun that. So, to find out the correct answer, just focus on the one that's followed by a subject. Here, all the choices are followed by a verb except for choice D. It is followed by a subject. Jack. Jack is the subject. So it could be changed to a reduced relative clause. We can simply say this is the house Jack built. So the correct answer is D. Question number 9. This is the video to show you. In a question like this, try all the options and put them in the blank. I'm sure it'll be much easier to find out which option is correct. Now, let's do it. This is the video which I wanted to show you. That I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you. So, first of all, make sure if there's an agreement between the relative pronoun and the preceded noun. Here, the preceded noun is the video. It's a thing. So, in both options, A and B, the relative pronouns which and that agree with the noun video. And what is more, focus on the items that came after the relative pronouns. Here we have the subject I. So in this case, the relative pronoun can be reduced without any change in the meaning. As you can see, in option C, the relative pronoun is reduced, but still makes sense. So the correct answer would be D. All of them are correct. Question number 10, the last question. Which one cannot be changed to a reduced relative clause? Let's see which one cannot be changed to a reduced relative clause. Remember, only when the relative pronoun is followed by a verb, it cannot be changed to a reduced relative clause. As you can see, in all the choices, the relative pronoun is followed by a subject, apart from choice C, which is followed by a verb, the verb visited. In choice A, here, the relative pronoun is followed by a subject, we, that we. B, the same, who, I. C, here we have a verb coming after the relative pronoun, who, visited. Option D, which, she. So the correct answer is C, because it is the only choice that cannot be changed to a reduced relative clause, because it is followed by a verb, the verb visited. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it useful and informative.